So welcome everybody, and thank you so much for coming to the COVID-19 weekly meetup and check-in. For those of you who are just joining us, we have just gotten started. Hopefully all of you can see my screen. And we will be monitoring the chat box if you need to make any comments or anything like that. As a reminder, you can of course do this at any point in the webinar, but at the end, if you'd like to save the chat, you can do that by just clicking on, there's the type message here box, and then next to the file button, there's the little ellipse menu. And if you click on that, there is an option to save the chat. So feel free to do that at any point in time. So for today's agenda, we first are going to do our 3 deep breaths just to take some time for ourselves and calm our brains down. I wanted to take some time to talk about what's going great and what's going well. I think sometimes it can be easy to focus on the negatives, and I know that there is a ton of stuff that everyone is doing, either library related or not library related, that's something to celebrate. So start thinking about that. And then we want to continue with the library reopening discussion. So there are a few libraries on the call today who are in process of opening or have already opened to various extents. So we'd love for them to share their experiences, but also for everyone else to ask any questions, share any thoughts and ideas that you have, and for us to talk about some things there. We have some communication recommendations and discussion. There's a really great document from Texas that we want to highlight a few things in. And then we also have announcements and new resources. Again, though, at any point in time, please do feel free to ask any question, put anything in the chat box. This is time for all of us and for you all to cover anything that you'd like to talk about. So the first thing, again, is the 3 deep breaths. I put this picture of the aquarium because I just think it's really cool. Also, there's something very calming about feeling like you're submerged, kind of like well, I guess not really a sensory deprivation tank, but feeling like you're enclosed in a space and watching the world pass by. So if you all can sit or stand or however you're positioned, just make sure your back is straight. Try and ground yourself physically into whatever you're touching, whether that's your back against the chair, your feet flat on the ground. Really try and open up your shoulders. Take your earmuff shoulders and bring them down. Try and release all that tension. If you'd like to add some hands into this, you can fold your hands over your heart, or you can do cactus arms, which is what I'm going to do today. So when you inhale, you bring your arms up, and when you exhale, you bring your arms down. So let's do 3 deep breaths. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. And exhale. Awesome. So next I wanted to talk about, or just have a sharing time for what are some triumphs that you and your library have had, or just what are some good things that are happening in your life. Just wanted to take a couple of minutes for people to share that with each other. I'll go first. I made focaccia for the first time the other day, and I thought it was going to go horribly because it didn't look great, but then it baked up wonderfully and it tastes great. So that's a good thing that's happened to me.
I just think that's pretty cool, Amelia. I've never made that myself, so that's fun.
It is great. It was actually a surprisingly easy recipe. Ooh, so much stuff. Starla said, we
Yeah.
made it through our first week open with no major upsets. Congratulations, Starla. That's
Woohoo.
awesome. Beth said, when I bump into people, I have a date for returns now. That's great. Cindy said, we are giving donated children's books away each week at the school lunch pickup locations. Aw, that's awesome. Carmen said, I made quiche Lorraine. Didn't turn out super good. I'm sure it was great, Carmen. Christine said, my daughter was accepted to the University of Montana, my undergraduate alma mater. That's awesome. Congratulations to your daughter, Christine. Rhea said, I submitted my summer reading plans to my supervisor. It's a big project that's making progress. Abby says, I've been baking my own bread. Excellent.
Yay.
Fawn says, we have a board meeting today and it will be a work meeting, so I have brought food. That always makes any meeting a success. Kathy says, we are open with no complaints. Janet says, we just finished up our packets for the summer reading program today. Joey says, curbside is working very well. Carmen said, my daughter graduated with a nursing degree. Congratulations to her. That's really exciting. And then Brenda said, we are open and it's been great so far. Oh, look at all this good news. I'm going to save this chat. This is a great one. Mark said, in our second week of limited open services, and things are going great. Public is very grateful we are open and doing what we can to serve our community and keeping people safe. Our health department has been great to work with on making sure our plan is sound and appropriate for our community. Jennifer says, we made some pretty significant changes to collection locations and have added some sitting areas. The response from patrons coming in have been so pleased. We are never fully closed, have been taking appointments, but now we're open 10 to 1 daily. Joe, whoa, Joe, you got Girl Scout cookies delivered? How did you get that through?
Yeah, Joe.
I can only say I feel really, really good today.
Oh my gosh. Conrad says, we are open and have no problem. People are so happy to be here. They mind all the rules. Apparently I can't grab anymore, Jennifer says. I was just saying people are happy. Kelly says, we weeded our entire collection. We have discarded at least 1,500 books, reorganized our shelves to make them more accessible, and are finishing setting up our new Montana history room.
Ooh, Kelly, that's really cool.
That is really, really great.
1,500 books. I love it.
Wow, 1,500 books, yeah. Mitch just remembered his car is full of Girl Scout cookies. You could leave them in there, Mitch, and I know someone who will get rid of them for you. Jennifer also said, we did the entire collection. Our book sale will be amazing. Sonia says, patrons are really glad to see us. Michelle, library open, everyone happy and grateful. Approval for a grant that I wrote for a telescope loaning program at the library. That's great. Susie says, we were awarded a National League of Cities grant for Census Rapid Response. We got $5,000, and I think we were the only organization in Montana to get one. Congratulations. That is awesome. Look at all this great news. Nancy says, we inventoried our entire collection. Now the weeding begins. Rebecca says, ooh, I'm going to have my Girl Scout cookie connection. Thanks, Rebecca. Stacy says, Darby has been open and everything is going great. Joey says, we read it and done some deep cleaning. Organizing is still going on. Susie, there's a question from Rhea. What do you think you'll use your grant for? And Conrad says, we got a $15K grant from Three Rivers as well. And Pat says, Ekalaka is open and all is well.
Awesome.
So that is
Ekalaka.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing. Please do continue to share. It will be nice little bits of happy news throughout our conversation. And please do remember to celebrate all the really great work that you are doing and everyone else is doing. So thanks again for sharing. So next, we wanted to go on to a reopening discussion. I'm really glad that a lot of people mentioned already that they were open or in process of opening, some of the really good things that have happened. And so we know that some people are still deciding how to best do that, or when to best do that, or if to best do that. So we would love for people to contribute to these questions just to start off with. And Tracy, I think you said you were okay with leading this discussion. So
yeah, definitely. It was kind of great to hear that positive news. And I had asked these questions because I've been talking to librarians as they open up. And I know some of you, it's been a great success overall. Really, when you step back, people are pretty grateful that you are open or have at least limited services. But I do know that there are some challenges that some of you have faced. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity to kind of use our collective brain power. So my first question is, what challenges have you run into as you have opened, and what have been your pain points? And it looks like there's already perhaps answers. Oh, Mitch saved something. Good job, Mitch. I'll have to look at the image.
Yeah. A couple other mentions from Susie and Joe about the census, but Susie also asked, are people allowing volunteers to be working in the library? If not, when do you think you will allow them to come back?
That's a great question. Does anyone have a response for Susie?
Cindy says no volunteers at Bozeman. Mark says no idea when. Val says we've discovered that people don't read our signs. Oh, yes. Jenny says that the state library will allow volunteers in phase 3. Joey says no volunteers yet. Fawn says no volunteers. Nancy says no volunteers until phase 3. So no volunteers seems to be the trend, at least right now. Colleen says, challenges, we opened our doors April 27th, but have found people are not reading the signs with guidelines posted, so are not following the rules. And yes.
So maybe we could take these kind of like one at a time. It sounds like there are a couple others. I think that's what Mitch was getting at when he said main challenges, differing expectations about what open means, and maybe some others. Has anyone found like a really kind of good way to get people to follow the rules? Because I suspect in my conversations that's hard. People have different kind of expectations about behavior. And feel free to open your mic if that's easier, but you can also use chat.
We in Plains have on our signs by appointment only. The library is open by appointment only. So we have stragglers who come in who didn't make an appointment, but we never have more than 10 people in the library. So that might help you, because people are going to show up and not read the signs.
Thanks, Christine. That's a great idea.
I know the suggestion isn't practical in all cases, but given that we are limiting the number of people in our libraries, typically, I think one way to address people understanding what the expectations are is just to have a one-on-one conversation with them, greet them, tell them you're grateful that they're back in the library, you're happy to be there offering services, and while you're offering services at this time, these are the services that are available and these are the expectations, and make it kind of a welcoming experience.
I thank you, Jenny. And this is Joe speaking. I just want to make sure that Jonna she says she has a dreaded mask question. So wondering if you have a mic, Jonna.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, the dreaded masks. So for the most part, and we do have signage that says, please wear masks, please put all materials in the book drop. And for the most part, we have people really taking that to heart and coming in and wearing their masks. But we've had a couple of people that won't wear their masks even when we ask them. So how do libraries handle that? I was visiting with one of my board members about it, and she was not happy about that. But I don't think you could, I don't think you can make people wear a mask. Or can you tell someone if you prefer not to wear a mask, you can wait outside the library and we'll get you what you need? How are other people dealing with that if they're having mask issues? So I'm kind of curious how to deal with that.
Jonna, this is Jenny, and I did ask the governor's office for their suggestions on masks and whether or not libraries could require masks. And we all agree that your board can enact a policy mandating masks. My recommendation would be that you include that requirement as part of the overall behavioral expectations for your patrons. and that you could ask a patron to wait outside. I know that other libraries have said that's what they do, that someone can wait outside and staff will bring them the resources that they're looking for. I think if someone becomes disruptive, then you enact your disruptive patron policy and follow whatever that policy says, whether it's asking the patron to leave or calling security or something like that.
Thanks, Jenny. And there's been a couple of comments. Jennifer Reed says we recommend masks but do not require them. Sandra says that's what we plan to do. I'm guessing if you don't wear a mask, no problem. We will bring you the materials. And that's because 4 or 7 of us are in the high risk category. Starla says, I'm reluctant to have more than one staff member there at a time except in passing. Really hating wearing a mask in our town, not requiring it. So we are leaving it to our patrons to practice what is comfortable for them. Staff is wearing a mask at all times that they are in the library. Butte is having staff wear cloth masks that are provided, but we are offering free t-shirt masks to the public, but we haven't opened to the public yet. So theoretical at this point. And Jonna says, great, that helps with a great deal, and we'll take it to her board. Awesome.
You know, this is Joe. I just want to make sure Mark Wetherington's comment got in there because he did ask his city attorney and got permission to require masks.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Joe. I completely missed that one.
And then I see several other people who've suggested masks, but are not going to require them. And then I wanted to go back to Colleen, because some people did respond. Colleen, I don't know if you saw that, where they found that if they just changed where they put the signage, they had better compliance with the different rules.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like sandwich boards were fairly effective. So they suggested maybe just actually trying where you place your signage might help with people complying. And then it looks like there was a great discussion from Joey and others about people who are open allowing patrons to use computers, and are you disinfecting after each use? And it looks like several people also said yes, they are sanitizing after each use, and it is what their health department recommended.
Yes, and Val and Chinook said we have it posted not to enter without a face covering, mask, scarf, or bandana, and if they don't have one, we deliver items outside. No issues so far. Gail asked, are people furnishing disposable masks if they don't have one? And then Mitch also had a question, couldn't a library's providing masks to the mask list open the library up to some liability? And Nancy says, we recommend masks but don't require them. Library staff and wearing masks when anyone comes into the library.
This is Susie, and I just want to go back to the computer question. We decided that we were concerned about cleaning our keyboards too much. So we bought a bunch of saran wrap, and we're not open yet, but we've practiced it. So we are putting saran wrap on the keyboard in between users. And then we've disabled library cards. So you have to get a guest pass in order to get on. And we're handing people a guest pass and a microbial wipe and asking them to wipe down the mice themselves. And so then it's kind of on them.
That's a really good idea, Susie.
It is. It's a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, is anyone else furnishing disposable masks to people who come in? That was a Gail question. And I think that is a good question, Mitch, about couldn't a library providing masks open the library up to some liability? I know that is a concern of some, but not others.
Fawn's question about how do you allow patrons to look at books, gloves, and how to put books that have been handled, what to do with those. And then Carly is answering back about having a book truck placed near the shelves.
So it looks like Mark said to the mask question, our city attorney says not to provide them due to liability. Mm-hmm. And Jennifer says we have a few extra masks if someone asks. I think, Jonna, the reason it could be a liability is if you give them a mask and they get COVID and can prove it's happened at the library.
Yeah, the VAL is not furnishing masks due to liability and require everyone to wash their hands upon entering. And adults don't like that.
Correct. So it looks like there have been a couple of responses to the question about handling books inside of the library, including putting things on a cart and then sanitizing and quarantining them. And of course, Joey, I'm sure you could provide a disclaimer. In fact, I suspect a lot of places do that. I've seen disclaimers in different businesses, just kind of saying we do our best, but you should know we may not be able to completely protect you. Mark says our health department did not feel there was a significant risk of exposure via book browsing, comparing it to grocery stores, doorknobs, etc. So it looks like
I'm curious, the people that said like they're giving out the wipes and stuff, where are you finding them? Because we're having really a lot of struggle with trying to find wipes.
that's a good question. All of that, PPE, masks, gloves, cleaning supplies. Go ahead.
We got wipes. Our emergency operations center worked with National Laundry in Great Falls, and they made wipes. They used paper towels, and so they're making them for our emergency operations center, and we got in on purchasing them.
That's cool. Christine says Amazon. Carly says Walmart and Haver. Jennifer says we are now making our own wipes with disinfectant cleaner we scored and paper towels. Bozeman has no wipes using disinfectant spray. And Starla says we are using Solugard spray-on solution on towels. And then coming back to the book question, this is actually an interesting one. So Julie in Liberty County says our Board of Health is urging us to isolate books for 21 days after they have been touched. Is anyone else being asked to do something like that?
I say that's crazy. We've heard 3 days.
This is Jenny, and I'll jump in on that for just a second. We're waiting, and I hope you guys have maybe all seen too that IMLS has been partnering with a number of national organizations to come up with some more definitive authoritative research on the matter of print materials and quarantining. We expect that research any day. I don't know, if maybe it's even out and staff have seen it and I haven't. So we're waiting for that. We also have a contact at the state public health department in their public health office, and they've offered to evaluate that research and then make recommendations to local health departments based on that research. So I hope that we can get some actual authoritative guidance from IMLS that is recommended by the state public health department to local health departments so that we have a consistent message about quarantining materials.
I think there is farther in the slideshow. I think there is a link to the OCLC, IMLS, and Battelle COVID-19 research that's going on there in their project, which I think that's where some of this information will be updated when they come up with more information. But that link will be later in the slideshow.
Yes, and I'll make sure to put that in there. Also, just as a heads up, I think my chat is not working. The last thing that's in my chat box is a comment from Jennifer about we have a few extra masks if someone asks. So if anyone is chatting, or you guys, I think have done a great job of reading stuff out, but just to let you know, I'm not seeing any new chats coming in, so I won't be able to monitor.
I wonder if you close your chat and open it again. I mean, try that.
I tried doing that a few times, and it doesn't seem to work.
Oh, funny.
So.
Okay, we'll just.
We'll be happy
Abby
to
has
jump
the
in.
question of letting patrons read magazines and newspapers in the library at their own risk. I wonder how many people are actually letting people hang around in the library, or are you just having them come in and out rather than congregate? That would be my question. Yeah,
And
so
while
Conrad
people
says
have
15-minute time limit, no loitering.
And I did want to go back while people were typing and point out Susie also responded. There was a lot of chat about quarantining. Looks like the average is 72 hours, but we'll see what the study has to say. And Susie also mentions we are planning on not worrying about adult books and movies, and we are unsure about children's books, and we are not going to worry about the newspapers, and are only going to wipe down the plastic magazine covers once per day. And I think that that was what Mitch was responding to about there were some concerns over disinfectants damaging covers.
Yeah, and people seem to have time limits, 30-minute limits in the library and things. So that's interesting.
This is Susie, and I actually was on a call this morning with the people. It's the Continuum of Care Committee that deals with homeless people, homelessness issues in the city of Great Falls, and we're actually not going to have a limit on the amount of time that people can spend in the library, because one of the things we've heard really strongly from service providers is that people, vulnerable people, really need a respite. And they need to plug in their phones, and they need to have a place to use the bathroom. And there are a lot of other social service agencies that are telling us that since we closed, that's been a problem for them. So right now, we're not going to kick people out. We're only going to be open limited hours, but we're going to let them have that time. But we are going to keep an eye on it. And if we get full, then we're going to close the door and do some other stuff. But for right now, we're trying to balance being safe in terms of COVID with also being safe for the people that are vulnerable and don't have any other place to go.
Thank you, Susie. It looks like in the chat, 30 minutes is very common for the limits on the amount of time people can spend in the visits. There's some 15 and 20, some just come in and get what you need. And then of course, Susie made the case for not setting a time limit on it.
I also just want to remind people that you can save the chat, especially at the end of this, because there is so much good information in there from everyone. So at the bottom of the chat box next to file, there's the little 3 dots and more, and that's when you can save the chat, which I'd recommend doing it at the end of this call, but then you'll have all that information too. Just throwing that out there.
And then I want to capture Val said she's been using paper towels soaked in rubbing alcohol to sanitize books, and has done this for years and never had any issues with damage. Fawn had a question about what are the hours, and Fawn, do you mean what are the hours libraries are open, or something more specific? And then a couple of libraries maybe have problems with people ending up waiting around all day, and so they're feeling like they have to limit. It looks like a couple of you are limiting the number of patrons, and I just wondered maybe how you do that. Do you just count, or do you have a specific way that you, and then just let people know? So Fawn wanted to know hours that she allowed no restrictions to the patrons. I think that was for you, Susie.
Apparently, I prefer not to type.
It's okay.
So Mondays, we're going to do curbside, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays, we are going to have a vulnerable hour. So we're going to have open from 10 to 11 for vulnerable people only. We're not quite sure how that enforcement's going to go. And then Tuesday through Saturday, we're going to be open to everyone from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. And that's going to start next week.
All right, thank you. It looks like most of you feel like you're pretty small, and so you can easily kind of keep track of the number of patrons in there, and you post signs on the door if you've reached capacity.
So this is Abby, and for those of you who have been in our building, ours is a little different. We have like an entryway, a foyer, and so we really can't control who walks into the building. So our plan at this point is actually to keep the doors locked and place a doorbell on our front doors. with some signage, and we'll have people ring the bell, and then we can go let them in so that we can control the people just trying to linger in our lobby area, and we'll be able to keep track that way.
Thank you. Are there any other challenges or any other questions you want to ask your peers? And then
I'll jump in on a question that was asked last week about people coming in from out of state who should be quarantining and what we can do about it and whether or not we can keep them out. And I just wanted to share what the governor stated with regard to individuals quarantining themselves after coming in from out of state. He was specifically asked today in the press conference what the state is doing to enforce that quarantine. He mentioned having law enforcement and National Guard at the airports, like Joe mentioned last week. And then in addition, he mentioned things like reader boards on the highways as you come in, reader boards as you come into various communities, informing people who are coming in from out of state that there is a 14-day quarantine. But there really are no resources available to enforce a quarantine. In thinking about this and in thinking about your comments about signage, understanding this isn't a perfect solution, one recommendation would be to have some signage at your entry if possible that says, you know, out of care and concern for your library staff and co-patrons, you know, if you've recently returned from out of state, please, you know, please choose to visit the library after 14 days or something like that. I think it would be hard. You may know those people in your communities who should be quarantining, but you may not know everyone. And I know that it would be hard to enforce a consistent policy. So I just wanted to pass that information along.
thanks, Jenny. There's also been an exchange of hours so that people have a sense of what hours other libraries are open and how they're handling it. I also want to acknowledge that Gil said they've talked about creating numbers similar to what you get when you try and close in a store and they give you a number. So they've thought about using that for entry. It sounds like most of you are being pretty flexible and trying your best to kind of meet people where they're at. And Christine says we have a sign asking if you have been out of state, did you self-quarantine for 14 days? And so before I turn it over to Pam to kind of talk about communications, I'll just do, are there any other, I guess, issues that you've run into either with staff or your board or local government that you wouldn't mind chatting with your peers just to see kind of what's worked for them? And Joey points out that she's a resort town and the visitors are already here and not sure how to control library use. And Starla mentions she's seen some visitors as well, but they did come in masked and gloved. And that her experience or those from out of state are a little more used to taking precautions. So any other questions or challenges? Sounds like people are worried about tourists.
This is the Wadsworth Library, and the biggest challenge I've had is trying to work succinctly with my town government. They came up with their rules and regulations. Basically, I just ignored most of their rules because they are a different business and they didn't understand how the library ran. They had a bathroom issue where they were refusing to allow anybody from the library to use the bathrooms. But I had talked to a number of very high entities. I talked to the county commissioners and they said as a public entity, I was required to have the bathrooms open to the public and that their bathrooms had been open to the public at all that time. This morning, the town finally took down the signs saying I couldn't use the bathrooms, even though I kept telling my people they could use the bathrooms. because they were required to wash their hands. The issue I'm having now is the type of sanitizer that they are using in the kitchen bathroom area. It is so strong that it is affecting my breathing when I'm in the library even. It comes through the doors and the walls, and it really is very effective. And yet I can't say anything because of the tension and whatnot. So I guess I'll just play it out.
I saw that. I think Christine in Plains is saying the bathrooms are off limits, but sounds like a lot of other libraries are just either asking patrons to clean up after themselves or they're trying to sanitize it. That's an interesting point, Nancy, about the use of cleaners and how that might not be a challenge, not just for you, but for patrons who are using the library who might have sensitivities.
Well, I was going in after every person used the bathroom, which such a small library really wasn't an issue, and wiping down all touchable surfaces. I mean, I've been in contact with the Missoula Hospital with their sanitization experts, and I was following a lot of their leads and their sanitation technicians, and you know, their statement that, well, if they're using sanitizers that strong where it's actually coming over 30 feet into my space, they're probably overdoing it. But like I said, I'll just have to deal with it and suck it up.
It's very challenging during those times. The relationships are tricky and people are afraid, and that does make it hard. And Carolyn, I'll kind of get in touch with you about your question about the city attorney charging the library. Colleen does have a question for people. How many libraries are providing separate hours for the elderly or health compromised? And then while people are responding, I did note your question, Jody, which is, has your library officially canceled in-person summer programs and story time? Starla says, we are keeping the bathrooms closed. Circ desk staff is not covered to clean the bathrooms. We simply don't have the budget to keep janitorial staff on all the time we are open. Val says, in response to the question about special hours for vulnerable populations, we are doing by appointment for elderly or at risk. Abby says the first hour of each morning will be for vulnerable populations. We will be opening an hour earlier than normal and closing an hour earlier. Sandra says we plan to offer a 2-hour block. Jennifer says we also do by appointment only. And Stacy and Darby says, nope, not at this time. And so how many of you, Jody, asked about canceling in-person summer programs and story time? I think some responses came in. Butte has canceled summer programs, and we will offer outside and families have to register. Joey says story time will be online. We will hand out craft bags every other week for children. And Mark says we're not doing special hours, but do offer curbside services for those who don't want to come in. And Reyes says we have plans for live and virtual programs at this point. And then Joe shared a nice website from the CDC that recommends cleaning and disinfecting. And Steph says Butte's going to offer elder hours initially. Sonia says Miles City is doing summer reading and story time at our city park along with virtual. Val says we will offer outside programs, possibly working with the school who will be doing meals this summer. And Starla says we are still doing deliveries for anyone not comfortable with coming in. And Nancy says Laurel has canceled all extra activities at this time and are exploring online activities for summer reading and continuing with the lunch program with the schools. Susie says summer reading, we are going to have craft bag pickups. We will be having reading logs available, hoping most people will use the Read Squared app, and we will be having online programming. All right, so you can definitely keep the comments coming in and certainly any questions. I do want to be mindful of the time, and I know that Pam has some good information talking about communication because that is super important. So I will go ahead and turn it back over to you, Pam.
Okay, and I will just briefly go over this, and you should be able to see my screen now, which has a document on it, because Joe did put this in the chat way back. So it's in the chat. And it's also going to be on the resources page that Amelia has going. But this is a document.
I'll add it again.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, because it's so far back. People have come since then. It's from the Texas Library, but it has really good information about communication. And I really encourage everybody to read through this because there are just some really good points to keep in mind. Just of how you communicate and who you communicate with and what you're trying to get out there to remind people that the library is still essential if you haven't gotten that point across to some of your community. And the one thing that struck me right away was in their notes, and I really would want to point this out, that don't confuse open versus closed with essential versus non-essential, and focus on service, and don't confuse physical access with being essential. So I think those are really good points to keep in mind, that just because you're closed doesn't mean you can't be providing services, and you can still be providing essential services, and you're not non-essential just because your doors might be closed. So there's so much in here that I'm not going to go, through page by page, but there are some really good suggestions of taglines. If you're trying to put out some communication, you could borrow some of these from them. And the other place that I really thought was the best thing to read through was here in the places to start and this crisis communication. All of these tips in here about being proactive and compassionate, and we've talked about this on being under stress and communicating. It's harder for people to get the message when they're stressed, and so you need to say it several times and several different ways, and what's appropriate for the people you're talking to. I really like the be calm, be factual, and direct instead of getting the emotions involved, even though things are really emotional at this time, being between why isn't the library open, why is it closed, how come I can't get this, how come I can't come in and use the computer. Just stick to the facts and stay calm and direct, and have your policies listed out there so you can point to them and say, this is what the board has decided and we're following this policy, or this is what the CDC is directing, or this is what the governor is directing. Whatever you can point to, and just keep that there and keep it factual. So a lot of this section is really helpful, and I just want to...
They want you to share your screen, Pam.
I was sharing my screen.
No, we don't see it.
What? All this time I've been talking, it says I'm sharing.
No, try again.
I'm so sorry. I will stop sharing.
I can try to open up the document too, but
And
no, better not. Yeah, you try it.
again.
It worked earlier. Let me stop sharing my
We're seeing
screen.
Amelia's screen.
Oh, Amelia,
I'm sorry.
you're hogging everything. I thought that people would be seeing it by now. So my gosh, yeah, I'm talking away here. So do you see it
Very
now?
good.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
yes, we do.
I won't go back and say that all again, but you can.
You might
open
make it a little bigger though, because it's hard to read.
Oh, really? Okay,
Just a little.
that's
Just a
getting
little.
that's
If
getting
you can-
complicated now.
Joe dropped the link to this document in the chat, so you
Yes,
can follow
and
along that way as well.
Yes, for sure. But
Good enough. Carry on.
okay, well, now you can see where I highlighted the don't confuse open versus closed, because it's a PDF and it doesn't really want to get bigger on my screen. So open the document when you have a chance and take some time to read through it, because there is so much good information in there that's why I want to share it. So it's in the links in the slides. And Amelia, did you put this up on the resources page?
Yes, I
Okay.
believe I did.
Okay, and Joe
If
put it
not,
in the
I
chat.
will check and
Okay.
make sure that I did.
Okay. Well,
Definitely
I
thought
really
about doing it.
Oh, well, good. I know. We all think about doing things and it doesn't always happen. But there are lots of good tips in here. I really like also the challenge assumptions. And this might be really helpful. Libraries as place, we always think of libraries as the place, but it's not just the physical building, it's more of the services. And the paragraph on page 4 about there are ways to serve the public without the internet. You can have conference call book clubs. I thought there were some great suggestions here. So use your creativity and come up with some ways that you can provide your library services that don't necessarily involve the internet if you don't have that option, or if your community doesn't have a lot of internet service. As we know, sometimes that's not the greatest in some spaces. Be creative and come up with other ways. Go out to the parks. Like they're talking about summer reading programs in some of the parks and things around your town. There are other ways to provide library services, and this was a great document that had those ideas too. So that's all I want to say about this document, because there's so much in here and you just want to read through the whole thing. So Amelia, back to you.
Excellent. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. Hopefully you all can see that.
I can see it.
Okay, perfect.
And Amelia,
yes?
This is Tracy, and since you said the chat's not working right, Carly did post she would like some guidance about computers. A number of patrons may not know how to do what they need to do, and they'll need assistance. How can we help them while still keeping a safe social distance? I see what you're saying, Carly. So it's digital literacy. Some of our patrons don't know how to do these things, even like file unemployment and so forth. What have other libraries done? Because I know some of you have been offering these services. How have you tried to keep your staff safe?
This is Joe, and I just have just an idea. This is an opportunity where you could be at a different computer and send a Zoom conference to that person and see their screen or get that started for them, and then go to a different computer and actually can walk them through it right there. I mean, you can do that. You can still Zoom in the same building.
That's a really good idea, Joe. Sonia says, we think Montanans have a resiliency to overcome adversities. We truly believe we can begin to look forward to a thriving, positive future. Crystal says, or you can use Google Hangouts. Jody says, I have worried about that as well. Someone suggested looking into screen sharing the way we receive tech support. This would require the right software. And Kelly says, you can set up your public workstations to remotely connect and help them. Heather M says, there is also the ability to share my screen. And Val says, we have had a couple of issues where we needed to help someone. We were able to stand back and walk them through the steps. And Starla says she ended up just kind of volunteering to do the job for the patron and had her move away from the computer and did the best we could. And Brenda says, I will run the computer or I keep a wipe in my hand and help while we dance back and forth. And Nancy says, we make sure we wear our masks, but we do talk them through their issue. All right. Thanks, everyone. Okay, back to you, Amelia.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. I didn't see any of those chats, but I heard Tracy read them off and they sounded great. I do want to go over some announcements as well as some new resources to highlight. We are probably going to run over a little bit, so if you do need to sign off at 4 o'clock, feel free to. Please do remember to save the chat if you would like to. First announcement is to make sure that your person record and your contact information is updated in Aspen. Chuck had mentioned to me that a lot of registration emails were being bounced back and weren't going to correct email addresses. So it's not the end of the world, but you know, it might just be good to update it in there, not just for you to get communication from Aspen, but also for when other people are trying to contact you and find you, making sure that your contact information is correct. So you can go in and do that through your Aspen account. If you have any troubles with that, please do let us know, and we can help you troubleshoot that. And then we have a census update from Joe.
Very quickly, in case you didn't know, the census workers across our state are finally going to work. And for those of us like me who live in a community that only gets post office mail and doesn't get mail delivered at home, that means that door hangers are going to start appearing in our communities starting this week. So over the next few weeks, there should be a better notification. So if you have patrons who've expressed concern that they haven't gotten anything or they're still waiting for a census worker to show up, the first thing they're going to get is that invitation to respond. And I will point out it's a little confusing because if you've responded already from your household and before you got your invitation with the number on it, you're good. You don't need to do anything again. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear about that. And if you have any questions, oh, there's Jennifer Brunel. She got hers on her front door today. And Val says they've been out in Chinook. I know this is kind of a big thing in Montana. We have just about 50% of households have responded to the census, so we have a lot more work to do in Montana. And if you are one of my Census Champion libraries, you're already on my list, but if you have not been getting regular emails from me like every week or two over the past few months, then you're not on my list. And if you want to get census materials for your library, just let me know today or by tomorrow, because we're sending out a box of materials to libraries that want them, and that will include census posters, lawn signs, a table runner. If we have enough, you're going to get a water bottle. Don't share those. And stickers and some other materials, mostly from the Census and Economic Information Center in Montana, and a few things from us. So that's it. And I'm just curious also to know if you're planning to use your mobile hotspot to help Montana get a complete count, if you have any ideas on that. But you can share those with me or just pop something in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. And so a couple other things on here. If you saw on Wired, the Public Library Association sent out a survey to see public library response to COVID-19. And so they're hoping to compile that and create a report. This is not mandatory by any means, but if you're interested, feel free to respond and enter in how your library has been affected and how it's responded to COVID, and that will be added to this big Public Library Association data collection. And that would be a really interesting report when they do release that to us. Also on here, the IMLS study on materials handling, a progress update. This is the REALM project that Jenny had mentioned earlier. So like Jenny said, it's still in progress. And so there's some preliminary data that's come out, but there's nothing definitive that has been said, but they are looking into this. And so this would be a good link to save and check back on. And we'll also be sure to let you all know if and when we hear something from IMLS and this study. But this is something that they're looking into and they're doing research on.
I did just put the link to that page in the chat.
Perfect. Thanks, Pam.
You're welcome.
And then there was a quick thing on the MSL Hotspot program. And Tracy, did you want to give a quick update on this and talk about where we are?
And Kelly, just so you know, Amelia is going to cover the MSL community events calendar, but she's waiting till the next slide because she has visuals. So MSL Hotspot program, I think many of you, if not all of you, library directors received an email from Suzanne Reimer and possibly some follow-up emails from myself and Pam. The State Library Commission approved purchasing hotspots for public libraries and tribal college libraries in Montana who were interested in participating. It was definitely something we wanted to be your choice. And so we have been contacting you to get that program rolling, and we are actually placing the orders. The commission approved paying for the data on those mobile hotspots for a year. And we have been trying to gather as much as we can to make it as easy as possible for you to roll these out, because we realize that this is kind of an immediate need. You know, you may have students or other family members in your community who do not have internet, and this will give them access to the internet through a cellular device. They do still have to have a device like a tablet or a Chromebook or laptop, but this little mobile hotspot will use a cellular connection to provide internet access. And you can also choose to like check them out to local businesses if there's places where you could safely have people use the mobile hotspot in order to access the internet if they can kind of practice social distancing. So Amelia has been hard at work in creating a website which will have all of this information in one place for you, and we hope to begin rolling those out soon.
Yes, and Joe, I realized I didn't link the website in the PowerPoint, so I just dropped the hotspot webpage link in the SLR chat. If you can put that in the Zoom chat. And there are some really great frequently asked questions on there. There's some example circulation policies, some user agreement templates that you can look at. And we are planning on adding a little bit more information as well. But before you even get your hotspot, you can take a look at that and see if any of that is helpful in helping you set up your program and getting it started. Any questions in the chat or anything? I want to make sure that people can ask if they have questions about the hotspot thing.
I have posted all the links from your slide and also the mobile hotspot lending program information link as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. Okay, so I hadn't forgotten about the MSL community events calendar, and it is because I have a visual here that I wanted to share. So this was something that we saw from the Delaware State Library. They have a communal calendar of all the virtual library events that their public libraries have, and in order to share them with the wider Delaware community. So we have a community events calendar now. It's on the Aspen page. You can see there's a link there. So this is the public facing calendar. And right now it's a little bit empty. So there is a paragraph or a little blurb at the top saying this is for any Montanan who wants to attend a virtual event that Montana libraries want to share with a wider community. And then there's also a librarians, if you have an event you'd like to share, please submit it here. And if you click on that link, you'll be able to enter in your event on this calendar. So anything that you're willing to share and you don't mind other people attending, please do submit that into this calendar and it will pop up on this public facing calendar on Aspen. I'm hoping that this is something that I could share with other organizations around Montana, such as the 0 to 5 Coalition, Best Beginnings, the After School Network, teachers and schools and that sort of thing. So I'm hoping that we can populate this. But this is also, you know, we're trying this out. It seems to be working well for Delaware, and if it works well for us, that's great. But you know, if it's not something that we're interested in either, we don't have to continue it. But this could be a really cool resource. It could be a great way to widen your reach as well. So again, if you have something that you'd like to contribute, it can be a standalone event or it can be a recurring event. Either one would work. So please do contribute, and we'd be happy to have whatever event you want to share.
So Cindy has a question, Amelia. She says our programs don't drop on regular times, just when we can, and we post on Facebook and YouTube and people can watch anytime. So she was kind of curious about what should we post on the calendar, and I think you kind of expressed, you know, recurring or standalone, but she's talking about things where people can watch at any time.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Maybe just the start time, the very, you know, like when it originally posted, and then people can, you know, include the link. I mean, if it's a Facebook, like streaming Facebook thing, Facebook Live, that's what I was trying to think of. So you know, you just put it on the date that it started.
I know. This is Cindy. I was just kind of worried if we did that, like if I posted it last week and now it's like, this week, people aren't going to go back and go, oh, let's see what was happening last Monday. So or I could post it like a whole bunch of times throughout, hoping at some point people will watch it. I just don't know, because we're not running a real calendar. We have some programs that are on regular times, but for the most part, we're just posting. We're kind of taking turns and just trying to get, several programs on every week, and we're doing it whenever we can.
And I think, Cindy, you could, as Joe said, you could post it just when you upload it. But you could put in the description saying this link can be viewed at any point in time. And you could provide further context in the event description. And I think you could probably train some people to be like, oh, I'll just favorite this Facebook page and, follow it from there. And you can sort of direct people to your channel that way. But there are people who I think will maybe look at this calendar, and then it'll still see the events from Bozeman, even though it's not like a set live event that you've done. I hope that answers your question.
And then Jody said, I wonder if a list with links would be more helpful than a calendar. I also find online calendars overwhelming when you end up with multiple events on one day. And then Jenny responded, or you could include in the description live or recorded.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am open to a list. I think from just my time perspective, the calendar format was nice for like user submitted events. I guess you could do that with a list, like with a survey, and then giving people access to the spreadsheet. If we'd prefer to go that route, we totally can too. I think it was also just, I saw Delaware had a calendar, so I was like, I'll make a calendar too. But I'm not married to this format. We can definitely change it if we would prefer a different one.
So Jenny says, I think we could do both lists and calendars. Cindy says we could certainly try the calendar for now and see if users are watching. If not, a list might work, but I like the visual of a calendar. And then Kylie did post for everyone, going back to an earlier discussion, RE unemployment assistance. She says the Montana Department of Labor and Industry has tutorial videos on how to file. So I think this is in reference to how do you help someone and yet stay safe and socially distant. She's pointing out that you could direct them to some tutorials that the Montana Department of Labor and Industry has available. And it will show them how to register for a Montana Works account, as well as how to file for unemployment.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Tracy.
Yeah.
And feel free to send this link to, like, anyone can submit from your library. It doesn't just have to be one person who's doing the submission. Anyone who has an event that they'd like to share, please do contribute. Okay. And then I wanted to also highlight some new resources. So in the COVID-19 Reentry and Reopening Guide, Pam, I did include the Texas State Library Communications Guide.
Well, we didn't put the link there, but that's okay.
I didn't put the link there, but it is in the COVID guide.
Yes, thank you.
So you can take a look at the document that Pam showed there and download it yourself if you would like. The American Library Association also has a webinar coming up on Friday at, I believe it's 12 p.m. Montana time, but you should double check because I'm not good at time conversions. But it's working together on planning policy and legal issues for reopening a public library. And so they have a board member, an attorney, and a librarian coming to talk about this. I think
it sounds like a joke. Board member,
I know it does.
Walk into a bar.
They walk into a library.
It's at noon Mountain Time. I'm looking at it right now. I'll post the link in the chat box at 1 p.m. Central. So
okay, great. So I know this might not be relevant for some of you already, but as you've probably already gone through this process, but for those of you who are still mulling over things, this might provide some more guidance and some more ideas to think about. I also included some other state reopening plans. So this is not like a state library focused thing. It's just the general state plan for Indiana and for Washington. So you can take a look at those. And then these are some links that Joe had sent me last week, I believe, from the Yale University Library about materials handling and collections. They had a really great guide about that. There is the IMLS research project, which both Jenny and Pam had mentioned earlier, that Realm project. This is just the announcement from IMLS describing the project if you wanted some more information on that. And then there's also an American Library Association listserv archive for the Preservation Administrators discussion group. I think there had been a little bit of email back and forth on this listserv about safe handling and what's considered safe handling. I mean, I think we've also discussed things in our COVID meetups, but it's just there in case you do want to take a look at that, and also in case anything else comes through on that listserv. I will warn you, it does look very like late 90s web browsing when you click on that link, but you just have to find the most recent email exchanges and you can find it there. And then there's also on the general COVID guide, there is a COVID-19 updates page from IMLS. So this is pretty broad level, but you know, if you just want to see what's happening sort of nationally and federally with IMLS and libraries, this is a good page to bookmark. I added some things also to the online professional development section. Michigan has just started releasing their webinar archives that they've done in the past couple of weeks. So they have a STEM motion webinar with someone from their planetarium. They have Singing Our Way to Literacy with Jennifer Strauss, and then Childhood Trauma in a Time of Crisis. So these are free and available. They are YouTube links, and you can take a look at those if you would like to learn more about those topics. And then I also wanted to highlight StarNet, if you guys are familiar with them. They're a really, really awesome resource for libraries for STEM programming. They were the ones, StarNet was created by the Space Science Institute, and those are the lovely folks who gave us the NASA kits from last year. So they have created a STEAM Ahead at Home collection on StarNet, which has a bunch of activities that you can easily do at home without technology, with technology. Their activities are really, really well explained. They oftentimes have accompanying videos and materials and things like that. So I would highly recommend checking them out if you're looking for activity ideas to do with patrons and for any online programming. And then I also received today CSLP, the I forget the name of this subcommittee, but they work with the summer food program. And so they've created the Read Up Summer Food Site Manual. And so for those of you who are still doing summer food and feeding children this summer, this is a great little manual to look at. They've adapted activities from the online manual that can be used outside of the library, that can just be sort of like, you know, a really easy supplemental activity in addition to feeding children if they're looking for something more to do. So you can download that manual, you can share it with whomever in your community, and it's another really great resource for those of you who are doing summer food program sites. And I think that is it. So we only went 12 minutes over today. If you have any questions about any of these things, please let us know. I will be including all of these links in the Vimeo description when I upload it to our Vimeo channel later on today. And please do remember to save the chat if you would like to, and all the great discussion that's been happening. Any questions?
Joe has
I'm
been
just catching up on links, so give me a second.
I know, each week I'm like, oh, there's not that much to put in, and then somehow the list always grows.
Have any cat anecdotes this week, Amelia?
No cat anecdotes, surprisingly. They've been very sedate, sort of. Ooh,
Okay.
no, I guess I did get my cat a microchip feeder. And so now I call her Professor Pocky because she had to like earn a whole degree in order to figure out how to use that thing. So I'm very proud of her. to figure out if she figured out how to use it. So that's my cat story for the week. Is this still recording? I think it
Yes,
is.
it is.
Oh my God.
You might want to stop it before we get more into the
Okay.
Little editing software.
That's
You have to whip out your.
Without
Take out the cat
Camtasia.
discussion.
I
think it's still recording.
I am gonna stop the recording for now.
Okay.